So welcome to this video. Thanks for joining me here. It's called The Big Picture and What Really Works, 3 Core Practices. And I want to share with you a perspective on the spiritual journey, perhaps different than the way that you've looked at it before, and share possibly some new information with you. And I hope it's helpful to you. So let's dive in. Okay, so big picture perspective on the spiritual journey. Life itself is the spiritual journey. Every aspect of our existence can be used for spiritual practice, serving and supporting the soul on its path through form and matter. So, what this means is we are the soul and we are consciousness, and which is another word for spirit. And it's journeying through this realm of existence that we call Earth, and having all these diverse experiences here. But we're not, as the quote goes, we're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings. We are spirit having the human experience. So, from my perspective, this is the big thing to bear in mind as we move along the spiritual journey, that every aspect of our life is an opportunity to practice. So here are some of the big motivations for why we get into a spiritual journey, a journey of consciousness in the first place. And this is not an exhaustive list, but these are six big ones. The first one is suffering less and being happy, diminish feeling bad and experience well-being. So this is the universal drive to feel better, and it's a legitimate spiritual motivation to get out of suffering, what the Buddha's teaching was about. Okay, so that's the first one. An inner calling, an inner knowing of the most important thing. And this often feels sacred when we touch upon it. There's just this inner knowing that, this is more important than anything else, and I'm going to follow this. A third one, call it beyond the known, a quiet pull towards something more. And this can, these can overlap as well. But this one can just be experienced as, there's more to life than what I know, than what I've experienced. And I feel drawn to that. And it's very important that I go seek that out, right? Highest potential can be another big motivator, making the most of our finite time on Earth. So we're aware that, we're going to die. We don't have an unlimited amount of time here. And we don't want to have regrets when we get to our deathbed, and bring forth, the highest potential of our being. That's a powerful motivation. Spiritual awakening, a strong resonance with spiritual teachings. We encounter spiritual teachings. It's easy nowadays. They're all over the internet. And things that the spiritual teachers are saying resonate with what we feel. And so we associate our inner impulse with spiritual awakening, right? And then the last one, self-expression, creativity that flows from our unique essence. I also see that as a spiritual impulse as well, because it's this drive to create something that hasn't been created before, and it helps unfold more of our soul. So here are 6 big motivations for why we, and we can have multiple, but why we get into a spiritual journey in the first place. So the problem of conflicting guidance. So, like I said on the last slide, um, we're drawn to something or to do something or to experience something beyond what we know. And so, we're not going to know how to get there. So there's a wisdom in looking for teachers. And this slide says many beacons of light, teachers, teachings offer guidance for the spiritual journey, how to progress, how to bring about what's meaningful. Yet these sources often contradict. Go this way versus go that way. Deal with it like this versus deal with it like that. Conflicting messages give rise to confusion. And particularly today in the information age, there's so much information in the spiritual field and the self-help field, and so many different practices and perspectives, and it can be difficult to know what's true, and it can feel like many of them have truth. So, this creates this problem of we have this inner impulse, this strong motivation inside that we engage the journey to respond to, and yet we get mixed messages, confusing messages about which direction to go and how to proceed. So, the Enneagram, dispersing confusion. And I'll read this and then I'll explain a bit more about what it means. The Enneagram helps disperse confusion by mapping each spiritual approach onto a universal framework. It's all-encompassing and reveals something of great power. You may or may not be drawn to the Enneagram, and that's perfectly okay. We're all drawn to different things, but there are insights here that everyone can take away, whether they resonate with the Enneagram or not. Some of the things that I offer are, they are totally about the Enneagram. With this particular information that I'm offering you today, you don't have to be drawn to work with the Enneagram directly. But what I do want to share today is that for me, this has been an amazingly illuminating framework or map to disperse that confusion that I was mentioning on the last slide, because we can see how all the different teachings, they are congruent with the patterns of the Enneagram. So when you can see them all kind of mapped in front of you, it's not confusing anymore. You have a very clear mind. So for me, the Enneagram has been really powerful in dispersing the confusion of receiving all those mixed messages. And like I said, you may or may not be drawn to work with it directly. But today, there's something within the Enneagram that we can pull out that applies to everyone, whether they work with the symbol or not. And so that leads to the next slide. Okay, 3 domains of consciousness and energy. Each subtle center is a domain of consciousness and energy, a distinct sphere of activity. All 3 domains are interrelated. So we have the body or the belly center, okay, the heart center, and the head center. And this is, like I said, you may not be drawn to work with the Enneagram, but this is actually the basis, the foundation for the Enneagram is these 3 subtle centers. And they're relevant to everyone because, we all have a belly center, we all have a body, we all have a heart center, we all have a head center, right? And we're perceiving the information of life on mental, physical, emotional, spiritual levels through these centers all the time. And how we're functioning in life is determined by the state of these centers and how they're in relationship to each other. Okay, so this is why it's relevant to everyone's journey. Okay, so we'll go more into these as well. The first center that we'll talk about, the head center, is the domain of the light of consciousness, mind or thought, perspective, and intuition. And I'll read this paragraph here. These three subtle centers, head, heart, and body, are relevant to everyone's journey. We experience life through these three sense organs of awareness constantly. Our well-being depends on whether they exist in harmony and balance or in disharmony and imbalance. Right, so each one is associated with different aspects of our experience. And here at the head center, it's both the center of the mind or thought, kind of as we would predict it to be, the center of perspective, but also, and this is why the concept of the head center is so helpful too, is it's not just the kind of the seat of the mind, but it's also associated with the light of consciousness, this witnessing awareness, that's simply aware, purely aware of what's happening in a very detached and free way. And, sometimes in spiritual teachings, there's actually many of them, the mind gets a bad rap because it seems to be getting in the way of perceiving the reality that we're seeking, or the truth seems to be getting in the way. But the mind is actually one end of the spectrum of the head center, and the light of consciousness also belongs to the head center. So if we kind of throw out our mind, it's like sacrificing part of our intelligence, part of our wholeness. And the mind can actually be used consciously to bring us closer to the truth and reality that we're seeking. Right? So I want to emphasize that here. And the last thing I'll say, because I'm just touching on these very briefly today, is this short list of aspects that the head center is the domain of. This can be expanded or unfolded, and there are many other things it's associated with, like mind or thought can be expanded into many different things. But I want to give you some of the big aspects that it's associated with as a strong starting point. Okay, and then the second one, the heart center. This is the domain of love, of emotions and feelings, okay, relationships and healing. So very different flavor and a very different feel than the head center. Here it's airy, it can be transcendent, abstract, mental, right? And then in the heart, affectionate, tender, soft, gentle. It's a totally different quality of our being. And in the heart center, we have, totally different themes we see here. So for the sake of time, I'll just touch on each one briefly, and let you kind of imagine into the other things that are associated with this center that can kind of be that we see when we expand this list, right? And then the third center, the body center, the belly center, is actually the foundation for the first two. It's the lowest to the ground, head, heart, body, and it's kind of the seat, and the seat in the sense of the lowest to the ground, the foundation of our being. And it's the domain of being itself, universal being, physicality or matter, integrity, empowerment, and will, which is the faculty for action. Right. So, strength and power are also some of the things associated with this center that kind of, when we expand this list, we see that. And moving in the world in a way that's aligned and has dignity and discipline. That's also the body center, but it's hugely important. And when people are talking about embodiment, it's about these qualities that we can know and that we can feel, to actually practice them enough that we become them. And so the body center is obviously associated with embodiment. All right, so just a brief overview of the three subtle centers. There's a spiritual level to each one of them, and in the ancient Hindu teachings, they called this Sat Chit Ananda. Sat Chit Ananda, and that was a teaching or a concept that pointed to, at the base of reality, there are these three fundamental qualities: being, or the isness, Sat, and then Chit is consciousness or awareness, and Ananda is bliss. And interestingly, those three qualities correspond to the three subtle centers. So the spiritual dimension of the head center is what they call Chit, or pure consciousness, pure awareness. The spiritual dimension of the heart is Ananda, or bliss. And the spiritual dimension of the belly is Sat, being itself, universal being. And also the divine ground from which everything, all of existence, arises. So, each one of them has this spiritual level to it. Okay. And as I briefly mentioned before, we can see each center as having a spectrum. So on the formless side of the spectrum, it's that spiritual level that we just saw in the last slide. So for the head center, on the formless side of the spectrum, it's that pure consciousness, pure awareness. It's not far away. It's immediately present, but it's just the more formless side of the head center. And on the form side of the spectrum, it's mind and thought, which we're all very familiar with because we experience thoughts all day long. And it's important to see the relationship between those, because as we work with the mind and we clarify the mind and open it up, that actually opens us to the more formless side of the head center, which is pure consciousness. So that's, what I was saying before, it's important to understand that, the pure awareness and the mind are both associated with the head center, right? So we don't want to just, again, just dismiss or deny or bypass the mind, because working with it will actually help open us up to the clarity of pure awareness. Okay. So in the heart center, at the formless side of the spectrum, it's the Ananda, the bliss, the pure love, and unity or oneness with all things. Okay. At the form side of the spectrum, it is our emotions, our ordinary emotions. And so working with those and healing our past wounds opens us up to the spiritual level of the heart center. And finally, the body center, at the formless level, it's that universal being, or the pure beingness, and the divine ground. And at the form level, it's our physical body, right? And so working through the kind of the knots and the places where energy gets stuck and the attachments that we have, and the desire for power and kind of ego things, working through those aspects that are associated with our physical body opens us back up to the formless side of the body center, which is the beingness. Okay. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, 3 core practices. This is where I wanted to get to today and to offer these to you. So actually, um, each of the 3 centers are associated with many practices, but these 3, in my experience of doing this for well more than a decade, these 3 are essential and they are core. Without these, we tend to do inner work in ways that lead us further away from where we're trying to get to, because we're trying to do it from our ego. So I'll mention that, but let's just go over the descriptions of each one first. So the head center practice is called disidentification. Become the witness of whatever arises. Experience yourself as the aware presence that's aware of what's arising, not bound by it. Leads to transcendental freedom. Okay. So we see this practice in many meditation, mindfulness traditions. If you've read like The Power of Now, this is one of the core practices in there. But a lot of people are aware of the benefits of disidentification, even if they don't call it that. That's what it is. It's more often called becoming the inner observer. So that's the head center practice. Then the heart center is consciously feeling. This is very simple. Restore emotional balance by consciously feeling emotions and sensations without being locked into a mental narrative. Alchemy that liberates the heart from suffering. Right, so when we are not attached to the story or the thoughts that we have associated with our emotions, then we can just experience them directly. And it's literally just feeling them. And what we actually experience when we feel our emotions directly, again, without, believing thoughts that are associated with them, and without this feeling of resisting them, like we're not feeling them so that we're not feeling them from a place of resistance, it's like we've let go of that resistance and we're just experiencing the feeling. What happens is it transmutes and changes and we're freed of it. So there's enormous power in just feeling. And then the third one is the gut center practice, granting being. One of my teachers called it acceptance. And it's the foundation for successful inner work. Begin by allowing what is to be as it is. Relax with it rather than trying to change it. As the adage goes, what you resist persists. So, like I said, one of my teachers called this acceptance, and it's not actually something that our ego can do. It's more so stepping out of the ego's vantage point, because our ego is always in resistance, always trying to fix, change something. And when we do inner work from there, we don't make any progress because of the principle of what you resist persists. So, it's very important that we start out by stepping out of that the part of ourself that's in resistance to what's happening, and engage with it from a more open place. So this is granting being. And these practices are particularly powerful when used together in concert. Each must be developed like a skill, like learning to play a musical instrument. As we practice, we develop self-mastery. So, yeah, we spend a good amount of time developing each of these, and then we also learn to use them at the same time. And that's when they're really powerful, when we can be present with our experiences where we're not identified, we're not resisting, but we're also not avoiding feeling, we're fully feeling it. It's our presence, it's our consciousness that liberates those experiences completely. And that's why I'm sharing this with you. Let's go to the last slide. Why these particular practices? They all have something in common, which is that they all have this common thread of non-attachment or purity, non-doing, and a non-egoic approach to our experience. And that's what actually works to transform our experience. So the paradox at the heart of inner work is that we experience improvement when our normal I, our normal sense of self, often called our ego, is not the one doing it. Right? So when we're trying to, again, when we're trying to fix, change, get away from something, that actually keeps us stuck in the same place. And what we have to practice is to engage with our experience, engage with our journey from a deeper place, from more on that formless side of the spectrum, and bring that to the form side to liberate it. Okay, so this was a lot of information that I went through over about the past half hour here. I hope you found some things in here that were helpful to you. And in the next video, if you join me for that as well, I'm going to go more deeply into the practice of disidentification as a way of getting unblended and unmerged from our experiences, from our thoughts and resistance, so we can work with it in an effective way. So thanks for joining me today. Hope this was helpful, and hope you have a beautiful rest of your day.